morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Conversations. I'm super excited, as I always am, every one of these, because today's guest is Kevin Gardiner from BeRemote. And I've had lots of people commenting and asking questions about this. So I don't want to talk about Kevin. I want to bring him on and introduce him properly. Kevin, welcome.
Hey, Libby. Thank you for having me.
Oh, great for you to be here. You know, we were just chatting before we got started here, and somebody had posted earlier this week that this was in fact the last normal week that we had 2 years ago. This was the week before we all started getting sent home.
Yeah.
For the pandemic. So here we are 2 years later, and I'm having you as my guest. An organization working for, so you're the COO of an organization called BeRemote, and I'll get you to describe what that is in a moment, but really focused on the opportunity to finally get this hybrid remote virtual world done right so that people aren't fatigued and they're not exhausted and they're not spending all day, every day on Zoom calls.
Right.
So I'm so thrilled to have you here, and let's get started. First of all, just say a little bit about what BeRemote is and what it does, and then we'll get into a bit of a discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So BeRemote provides technology. Our platform is called Reteam, and we have a standalone web app where you can download us on the Apple iOS store, the Google Android store. We're also fully integrated into Microsoft Teams. And so really the platform was initially developed to build team engagement, to build stronger bonds between team members, to build participation. And that ultimately does help with productivity, and it drives employee retention. It's been interesting that a byproduct of what we've been doing, we've actually seen teams be able to reduce the number of meetings that they have live to cut time off of their projects. It wasn't really meant to be a productivity tool, but that's part of what happens. But ultimately, it's really a platform that helps drive team engagement and team cohesion for teams that are fully remote or hybrid, which usually means in office no more than 2 to 3 days a week.
Right. And so that's a lot of words and language that people may have heard before, but I mean, it really is solving an issue. There are ways to be asynchronous, right? Lots of us use Slack, WhatsApp, maybe more casually. I don't think anybody for work is really using Facebook. But these systems that we have, or people are using, what are they called, like project management systems, like Monday.com and those types of things. There's nothing wrong with any of these systems, but they're not really working in order to build the team cohesion that you're really talking about.
Right. Yeah. And actually, one of the things I'd say, there's this medium.com has this really cool pyramid about the levels of remote work. I wish we'd created this actually, but like it's from level 5 is horrible, and level level 1 is horrible, level 5 is nirvana. And most organizations are at level 2, where it's kind of recreating the office online. And part of that's just because we were forced into it. So now, so everyone's working from home, and you've got email, and you've got your video conferencing tool. Slack is most popular, but there's quite a few others. So there's Zoom and Slack, but it's more than just recreating the physical office virtually. It's really, how do you work with your teams, and how do people prefer to work? And so part of it's our platform, part of it is the processes that we implement. But really, we say we can get organizations from a level 2 to a level 4. Nirvana is kind of on you to get to that last step. But some of how this works, it's interesting. So Vivek is the CEO and founder, and he's really a technologist at heart. He's been a technology executive for decades, and he built the platform around social science research. And so I think it's helpful to give an example, one of where that plays into technology and one where it plays into process. So
Mhm.
one of the easiest examples, we have this happiness meter, and you can check in with your team members, and you can't check in more than once every 4 hours. So the idea is you don't want to be able to goose this thing, and you don't want to be over checking in. So the maximum is once every 4 hours, but it's not set. So this is what the research says, is it shouldn't just be set at, horrible to great and some spectrum in between. We actually have options like all good, I got this, or I need a team discussion. And it's
Mm.
not in sequential order, so that when you get a check-in, you actually have to think about what you're doing. You're not just like, oh, it's a 6 or oh, it's a 1, right? And more interesting is that when people first start getting checked in, they will typically, if your manager is saying, hey, how are you doing? Your knee-jerk reaction is to say, I'm doing great, right?
Mhm.
So if you only check in once a quarter, once a year, you've got these surveys, it's going to skew positive. But when you're doing this regularly, over time, people bring down their barriers. And if you need help, you start to say, I need help. You're not just going to keep
Right.
saying everything's great. And so we can actually track this over time, and we require at least 12 data points before we start to look at trends. And you can see, okay, how is Livy actually doing? And not just in this point of time, but over a time period. Maybe she's pretty engaged now, but if you look at the trend, she's actually a lot less engaged this month than she was 2 or 3 months ago. And so you start to see, whoa, something's going on. Is she unhappy? Is she a flight risk? And so that's where the social science comes in. It's not just 1 through 5, good to great.
Mhm.
Um, and just one other quick example I'll give, which is where, it's sort of some of its process, some of its technology. One of our more popular features is polling. So you can do real-time polling when you're trying to think, what are the big, hairy projects we want to tackle next quarter? And you want to get the team's feedback, and you can upvote and downvote. My knee-jerk reaction was, this should be, it should not be anonymous. Like, transparency is the best policy. But in this case, one of our advisors, who's been studying virtual team dynamics and researching for almost 20 years, she said, no, it should be anonymous, because otherwise the most senior person's ideas tend to get upvoted, again, because it's
Mm.
kind of human nature.
Mhm.
And so there, it's where part of it is our technology that enables the polling, but part of it is the processes. We work with organizations and say, no, keep it anonymous. That's where you're actually going to get the best ideas that are going to be most impactful to the team rising to the top.
Right. And I think you've said a lot. One thing that you just kind of, spilled out there, I want to come back to. You have somebody who works with you who's been studying virtual environments, virtual work environments, team environments for 20 years.
Right.
So as much as a lot of us think this is like a 2-year-old phenomenon, and a little bit before that, we were getting better at conference room type meetings, pulling in somebody from another city or another country. There is nothing new about working virtually. It's been happening for a really long time. And if study's been going into it for 20 years, it's been longer than that. And I
Right.
know because I worked for a virtual organization 22 years ago. When I
Yeah.
first became a coach, I studied through Coach U and Corporate Coach U, and then I worked for them. And we didn't have cameras. We had a conference line, like an 800, like a toll-free phone line.
Yeah.
And we met regularly on the phone. In fact, I did all my coach training on the phone.
Huh.
So without video. So it's not exactly a new phenomenon, but back to something else you talked about, this idea that here we are in person in our boardrooms and meeting rooms, and now here we are online. And I think this is where everybody has finally, put up the barriers and said, like, no more of this.
Right.
Because if meetings were bad and boring until beforehand, like, oh, and the lunch and learn. Somebody was asking about lunch and learns the other day from a training perspective. And I said, I'm sorry, but there's nothing worse on Zoom or Teams or whatever. you're way too close to somebody to watch them eat their salad. Like, can we stop eating in our meetings, please? Coffee's okay. Coffee is allowed. This is a coffee and conversation.
Right.
So so talk a little bit about some of the reasons. I want to get into some of the nuts and bolts of BeRemote because
Sure.
there's some stuff that you're doing better than any of the other kind of applications, at least that I've ever seen.
Thank you.
But what is some of this research saying? You talked about anonymity
Mhm.
being important when you're polling and that kind of thing. What else is really important that is why you're doing things the way you're doing at BeRemote?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and one thing I'd say about lunch and learns, because I don't like them either. And the sad thing is, a lot of the reason we have lunch and learns is because everyone's calendars are so full that the only time you could get enough people to take a break was between typically 12 and 1. But what's worse than that? So you're in meetings all day. Now you're in a meeting, but you get to eat your sandwich or
Yeah.
whatever. I hate that. But, so the interesting thing is, so Lucy Gilson's the advisor at UConn. And so she did start researching virtual team dynamics in very early 2000. And a lot of it was around IT organizations at the time, because you'd have distributed teams and what's the best way for them to work together. And Vivek actually started developing this in-house, well, he was thinking about it in-house because he had been managing distributed IT teams. And then he took this, he left the organization he was at and started BeRemote full-time, but it was still pre-pandemic. And it was only after or during the pandemic he realized, well, this is a much bigger use case than just for IT teams. But a lot of I hit on some of the things that the research says, but a lot of why Vivek was thinking about this is he felt that sometimes some of the more introverted folks weren't speaking up, or they didn't feel safe speaking up. And so how do you level the social playing field? And that's where check-ins help. Asynchronous meetings and project management helps, because now you're not putting people on the spot and saying, well, what do you think of this? They actually can respond during the time of day that's best for them. Usually if you have a distributed team and you're trying to bring everybody together live, somebody invariably is there at an odd hour, very early in the morning or late at night, or sometimes people are kind of, it's not the ideal time for them to meet, but we're trying to get all these people together. And so I'll kind of force this time to work, but I may be multitasking. I may not be paying attention at all. And so when you do this asynchronous stuff, people are actually working at their optimal time. They're focused on other people's contributions, and they are actually participating because they're not being put on the spot or forced to just say the first thing or forced to talk when they don't want to talk. And so that's where you actually get these better feedback loops, because it's more than the 2 or 3 loudest voices that are contributing and being heard. So that's a big part of it. And that's where it's been interesting. We have clients say, hey, we thought this was going to be a 5 or 6 month project, and it cuts a month or 2 off. That wasn't our promise. That wasn't the goal. But because people were more engaged when they were meeting and more people participating throughout the course of the project, you actually get faster feedback loops and better participation, more voices. And that actually, it builds the team cohesion. It gets people more excited. And one of the best things you can do for a person, what really drives a lot of happiness at work is feeling like you contributed and feeling like you were a part of something. It's not all the, the emojis and, emails that say great job. It's really, really being engaged and participating.
Yeah, that's one of the Gallup questions. I forget the exact wording of it, but it's along the lines of my opinion counts, and that's all about being able to have your voice. So I've got a video, or you gave me a video that we can show that kind of runs fast. But one of the things that really stood out for me when you're asynchronous. So this is where I should stop talking about Slack. I actually really like Slack. I think it's a great, tool.
Yep.
I'm on a couple of Slack channels where there's lots of opportunity to collaborate and get feedback on things. The problem, however, with most of these tools is the overwhelm of stuff in a disorganized presentation. And
Right.
so if I'm a team leader working in BeRemote or working in
Reteam.
Reteam, thank
Yep.
you, then I'm already in a system that I'm using. So a lot of organizations are using Teams.
Hmm.
So I'm already inside Teams, if that's the platform that I'm using.
Yep.
I can choose the people on my team. I can put out a request for updates or feedback or whatever, but how it comes back to me is all contained in one nice bundle.
Right.
So I'm not kind of searching for where did this person put their update, or where did this person put their ideas. And so the from the layout and from the way in which information comes back, it's all beautifully contained. And I think that that's so different. And it's almost like when I was watching the demo, it was almost like it was like a relief, like, oh, this is all organized.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And that's really what we've tried to solve for. And as we talk to our clients and prospective clients, a lot of them first, they are grateful that we can integrate into the systems they're already using, because they feel like they've got this technology fatigue and they don't want to add another app. And
Hmm.
so they're grateful for that. And then it just makes the apps they're already using more useful. But yeah, I've actually been using Slack for a long time, well, way before the pandemic, and I don't have anything bad to say about it. But I have felt overwhelmed at times, and you get all these different red alerts and this and that. And so, what has worked well with Reteam is we encourage the team. There is no limit to how big a team can be in Reteam, but we actually encourage it to be kind of no more than 15 to 20 people. It's more of a focused effort. It's very easy. You don't actually upload video. You can just record yourself live. You
Hmm.
can do audio, video, or text. And yes, it's all contained. So it actually helps when you do meet live, because we're not trying to get rid of all live meetings. But when you do meet live, with everything packaged where it is and everyone contributing the way they are, you don't spend, sometimes you waste half of the meeting just getting everybody up to speed on why you're meeting again and where was this. It's in my email, it's here, it's there. No, it's all right there. And it's nice that people can give updates in audio and video. Sometimes you just want to see someone or hear their voice versus just read a long text.
Hmm.
When you hear their excitement or you hear their energy, and sometimes it's just less painful. Sometimes I can just talk for a minute instead of writing and rewriting an email for five,
Hmm.
10+ minutes. So yeah, it's organized in a way that people can find what they've been doing and they can contribute in the way that works best for them, and it tends to be more engaging.
Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes. We've got a little bit of a demo that'll just sort of loop, and you can speak to some of the things. We haven't talked about some of the great opportunities around um, culture and welcoming people, and inclusion and diversity, and all of this fantastic stuff. And the water cooler, like the thing that's missing. We're missing the opportunity to pop in and have a chat, positive or negative. Like, it's all kind of there. So I'm not saying that we don't ever want to be live again, but it's all there. So just sort of as this is playing, tell us some of the stuff that we're actually seeing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a mix of the standalone app on the web, the app within the mobile app within Android or Apple, and then also within Microsoft Teams. Yeah, so the virtual water cooler, that's been something a lot of folks really like. You can set yourself to when you're available and when you're not. And if I have an idea, I can kind of just pull people into the water cooler, which that's one of the things we lost in the pandemic. So certainly we love not having all these commute times, but we've lost some of that serendipity of
Mhm.
bumping into someone at the water cooler, just having a quick conversation that's more than an email. And that's actually something, so we call it innovation decay. So what's found is when everyone started going remote, folks that are on the same team, like if everyone's on the finance team, they're still working pretty well together, especially if they've been working together for a number of
Mhm.
years. but it's that cross-team collaboration, finance with marketing, or finance with IT, that's actually gone down 25% since the pandemic started. And often the number one source of innovation is when people that aren't like-minded get together and brainstorm and have ideas. So the water cooler is meant to bring back some of that spontaneity. We've actually had some prospects say, well, can we force some of that? And what I mean by that is, hey, Kevin, you haven't been in a water cooler in a while, or you haven't talked to someone in this team in a while. Maybe we should encourage some of that to just happen. So we work with all of our clients. So depending on how they want to use the functionality, we could make that happen. And as you talk about onboarding and diversity and inclusion, so typically where we start is within the IT organization or within HR. And what we found is a lot of the new employees feel like this helps with onboarding, because you can join a team and you can see some of the conversations that are happening, and you can also see people's faces, see them in video, hear their voice in audio, and kind of see how the team interacts. And they feel like they know how to jump in, and it feels more welcoming. And that's also been hugely important over the last 2 years, because one of the things you'd hear people say when we first went remote, oh, this is great, and we're not losing productivity, and everyone knows how to work well. Well, what happens when you hire somebody new and they didn't have the benefit of working with you in the office for a year or 5 years or more? Now you've really got to try to find a way to bring someone up to speed and get them to feel comfortable with the team dynamic and comfortable enough to speak up and participate. And we've had lots of new users that say, hey, this just, I felt like more of the team really quickly. This was a really great way to get started and introduced. So again, some of it was by design, and some of it's just, you see how people are using it, and you start to bring those best practices to other new clients as they start to use it.
And I think I'll switch back to our other view, so that, because I think people have probably seen that. I keep coming back to the same thing. It's the way in which everything is organized and structured, where, in organizations, we're in a multitude of teams. We can be on a project. It can be our standard, management team. It can be the entire sales team or a region. So, there's all of these great opportunities to be national or global, or be very small.
Right.
But it's what it feels like, even though it is work and it can increase productivity. You're not just looking at a bunch of Gantt charts on status reports, which is what that other option generally gives you. So you either have like social channel, or you have project management websites, or systems, and this just kind of brings everything together.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And that's what, I feel like part of what we're doing is just helping organizations change the way they think about work. So yes, part of it is, well, we weren't hybrid and now we are hybrid, and so we need to figure that out. But part of it is just, some of the things we were doing before the pandemic, it wasn't great. We didn't, we weren't all great managers. We didn't all have great processes. And it wasn't just, well, but for this pesky pandemic, everything was great. No, but it didn't create bad managers, but it shined a light on bad management and bad processes. And so this is kind of that blend of, if it gets too social, then it feels like a popularity contest and it's all just emojis and Giphies and goofing around a bit. But if it's too much the other direction, then it's also less engaging and less interesting. And so it is a nice blend of the two. So the technology is a nice blend of the two. And then it's really about us coming in and working with you to say, here's some of the best practices. Here's some of the processes that you may want to implement that will help you. The tool helps, but you've also got to change some of the way you work. I mean, that's just kind of our new reality.
Yeah. And I mean, just ask anybody who's been in a regional office, coming into a meeting that's got 20 people in head office, and there's 4 people around the country, and isn't it all so very nice? when we say, Kevin, we haven't heard from you. Let's hear from you. But all Kevin has been hearing is like, people banging on their desk and it just, or somebody doesn't have a louder speaking voice. And so for them to try to project out to the region, it's, everybody's looking at them saying, speak louder.
Right. Yeah.
So really levels the playing field. I honestly, I think that this kind of system is so much more relevant now that people are starting to go back to the office, because not everybody's going to be mandated 5 days a week. You must be in the office from 9 to 5, because life doesn't happen like that anymore.
Right.
But when you are in the office, sure, maybe you can have some of that, water cooler stuff actually live. But this is what's going to make the difference for bringing people together who some might be working at home on Tuesdays when everybody else is in the office. So it's really a great leveling of the playing field.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things Vivek used to say, is his initial goal was to level the social playing field. And you hit the nail on the head with the banging on the table. And some of it is when you're not there live, you miss some of the side conversations, or once the meeting ends, then the conversation that's still happening in the room, the folks that are virtual don't participate in that. And so when you have these asynchronous meetings, it's truly a level playing field. Yeah. And then when you do need to meet live, because you still do need to meet live sometimes, it's more productive, and you've had these interactions asynchronously that now has built this trust where more people are participating. And maybe the live meeting is only a half an hour instead of an hour, or an hour instead of 3 hours, and now you do feel like, okay, well, I can stay focused. I can actually focus on this meeting and participate, where if it was 3 hours, let's face it, there's no way you're going to be focused for that long.
No. I mean, so many applications for this. We're running out of time. I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you, because I'm sure they've got questions. They've got questions around, how big does my team need to be before the system makes sense? When can I get started?
Oh, great. Yeah,
question for you.
I got the movie, right? So BeRemote.com, and you can request a demo and get in touch with us. We really say, as long as, if the team is as little as 10, we can start to prove the value. We typically do a free pilot that's 2 to 3 months. And even though some of the organizations, or actually a lot of the organizations we work with, are in the tens of thousands of employees, we typically start with just 10 or 20. So, it's free. It's not a lot of resources at the start. So your investment is minimal, and we can prove the value. And we have seen clients that even just 6 weeks, even though we say it's a free 3-month pilot, after 6 weeks, hey, we cut our daily meet down to 2 days live. We believe we're going to shave a month off of this project. Can we roll this out to more people? So, yeah, I'd say as long as the team's about 10, we can prove the value in 8 to 12 weeks.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, so everybody, Kevin Gardiner, COO BeRemote, his email, his phone number, and of course you can go online and request a demo, and you'll get either you or somebody on the team, I'm assuming.
Yep, and I'd say just the easiest email to remember, Kevin@BeRemote.com.
Yep. Fantastic. I just thank you so much, Kevin. I was super excited when I was introduced to you. I was chatting with somebody else, a mutual acquaintance, and we were talking about, how ineffective a lot of remote has been. And he said, you've got to talk to Kevin. And so that's how we've landed here. About a month ago, I think we met. So thank you. And thank you, everybody who came and listened. Of course, you might be listening through the replay. Next time, so the 23rd of March, fascinating woman from New York, another New Yorker, Kevin, Lee Kim. She is an engineer, but really a designer, a design thinker. And she started a social experiment that she was going to do for a year. And by the time we have our show, she will be in day 1302 or something like that of her social experiment. So more information will follow on that. Again, Kevin, thank you so much for being here. It's been a real treat.
This was super fun. Thanks, Libby.
All right. Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye bye.